Okay, this is session E, pasture soil health. And I just remind everybody that we passed out the evaluation sheet. So we ask that you fill those out for us. Make sure you circle session E on that. And when you leave today, please just leave them in the back of the room and we'll pick those up. Okay, it's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker for today, who is Bob Hendershot. I have some information on him. He's a graduate of the Ohio State University. He's a certified forage and grassland professional and a certified crop advisor. Bob started Green Pasture Services, a pasture consulting service, after retiring from NRCS, where he was the state grassland conservationist and the state grazing lands conservation initiative coordinator in the state of Ohio. Bob lives and farms in Pickaway County, Ohio, near Circleville, where he has a pasture-based sheep operation and grazes stocker cattle. Bob has received numerous national, regional, and state awards, and he's been, or is now, a member or officer of a number of organizations. Currently, he serves on the National Grazing Lands Coalition Committee, representing the American Forage and Grassland Council. Please welcome Bob Hendershot, who will be our speaker for this morning.
Good morning. We're going to hear some of the same things that Jim talked about, but I think we have different slides to tell the same story. But if you didn't get a copy of this, this is the Advancing Soil Health. It's from the National Grazing Lands Coalition. They had a series of grants. Ohio happened to get one of those grants to do some things on soil health, especially with grazing lands, and that's what we're going to talk about. I want to give credit to Doug Peterson from Missouri. He works with soil health and grazing lands in Missouri. But I also want to let you know, this year, 2015, if you hadn't heard, is the International Year of Soils. That's important. It was dedicated so by the United Nations General Assembly late last year. The purpose is to raise awareness and promote sustainability of our limited soil resources. So, forgot to get. I read a lot now. I'm retired. I always did read a lot. You've never read how important soils are today. David Montgomery wrote this book on the erosion of civilizations. You realize no civilization has ever survived that didn't have productive soils. And most of all the great civilizations died when they lost the productivity of their soil. The Persian Empire, Babylon, Egypt, the Romans. When they couldn't feed their own people, couldn't grow enough because of our soil. We talk about soil health. What's the most critical thing in soil health? Microbes?
pH.
pH? Is your soil healthy or is it unhealthy? What's the living portion of the soil? What? The organic portion. What do most of our soil tests show us today? 1 to 2%. Is your soil organic matter growing or is it depleting? One of the indicators I look at on grazing operation, we should be increasing organic matter. And what really determines your yield potential? Jim talked about it earlier. Water. What holds the water in the soil?
Organic matter.
Organic matter. It's not the clay. Clay holds a lot of water, but it doesn't give it back up very well. It's soil organic matter. So we're going to talk about ways we can build soil organic matter in our soils, especially our grazing land soils. How did nature make soil? Improve it. In this part of the world, we have huge herds of ruminant animals, buffalo, elk, deer. They graze the lands in a rather heavy concentration. High stock densities. And how can we heal the land now? He just told you next. Redo. We can do it by adding fertilizer. That'll help us build a little bit of soil. But also, what you think about Your accountant won't like you to think it. When you buy fertilizer, you write it off as an annual expense, don't you? You should think of it as a capital investment. It's like building a fence. Soil fertility is an investment in your soil. I know for accounting purposes, we treat it as an annual expense, but we ought to be thinking about it more as a capital investment line for fertility. But how can we do it without buying additional fertilizer? Manage the grace that we have. But the only real tool we know to heal the land is animal impact. Alan Sager. You go home, right, just go home and Google Alan Sager, TED Talk. Invest 20 minutes of listening time. It may take you another 10 minutes to get there. But a half hour of your time, and you'll hear Alan Sager talk about ways of using animals to improve our soil, so we don't end up with a civilization that's lost because we've lost our soil, the productivity of our soils. Listen down. It's a great presentation. Animal impact is everything that happens when the animal's on the field. Not just the grazing, but the hoof action. They're laying down, they're rubbing, the hair that falls off of them. When they shed, the saliva, the milk.
Is that you? I don't know.
But all those things. It's a powerful tool. Jim talked about it earlier this morning about how we can use animals to do the things we want to do on our pasture field and make those things work. And what is animal impact? There. Oh.
Oh, there you go.
There. I'm not a patient man. Biology. There's biology in that manure. There's biology in your gut. There's biology in the cow's gut. When she defecates, there's biology coming out of her. In her saliva, when she takes a bite of that, there's enzymes and things in her saliva, his too, when they take it, that stimulate the plants. And then the milk foam. All those things have biology going on in the soil. How do we measure animal impact? What did Jim talk to you about? Stock density. It's one of those tools that Alan Sager talked about, that Jim talked about.
Oh.
Is how we can.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's right. Number 10, I'm sorry, 10.
10.
Jim and I have the same impact. West Virginia.
Why is that on one?
It's thinking. It was
Still
thinking.
thinking. Searching for us. Computer, the third computer. We talked about those animal units that Jim talked about, the density, thinking of the number of animals that you have. So my example was 40 head of 1,250 pound cows. It just goes, makes the math work. 50,000 pounds of beef. We put them on our 10 acres, what's our stock density? 5,000 pounds. We put them on 1 acre, what is it now? 50,000. What did Jim say? That's what management intensive grazing is. It's around that 40 to 60,000 pounds. 50,000 pounds hits that thing. That 1 acre will feed those 40 cows for one day. Now, if I really want to do something to the land, I put them on a quarter of an acre and move them 4 times a day.
So yeah, just go back to where he was at.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, right.
Makes sense.
Yes.
You have people doing that.
Yes. Dairy farmers are on pastures twice a day.
But this another thought.
Did you hear the talk? His question was that when I had those 40 cows on 1 acre and I could feed them for one day, if I had 40 of those paddocks, I could move back around. I'd be at that cow per acre. Now,
Are you gonna get into trouble getting human being and some of that?
yes, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
That's
So
other
there's another thought on that, if you consider pushing on from Ohio to corn country, even if you have 200 bushel a acre corn, that's pretty good corn ground. Basis today's price is $4 a bushel,
future of grazing is bright because we can outcompete corn growers.
I was trying to help you out because I think I'm just looking
And this is 80,000 pounds, and this is 3 days growth. So they rained the day, the one here in the bottom left-hand corner, it rained that day they were there, they stomped it up a little bit. That's not a concern, because that will green right back out. But then the next one across, you can see how much we're leaving behind. Up close picture of that same thing. This is a little far up. Some of you may say this got away from us. But it hasn't pollinated it, or it's just starting to pollinate. With orchard grass in there, some of the other grasses haven't pollinated yet. So for some of you, this is hay making. It's still better than some hay that's being fed right now. So in terms of the quality of the plant. Well, they're at a stock type density now, they have no other choices. They're going to try and eat more of it, and it's brood cows. 140,000, this is 250 cow-calf pairs on 3 acres. And then, I think I got a picture, this is what it looks like when they're done. They ate most of that. There's a few stems, you can see there some of the weeds, but you can see the cow pods. They're just about every 2 foot. You got to be really careful walking through there if you don't want normal issue. You got to watch where you go. And then you see the Euro patches are these darker. It doesn't help.
Green screen.
These are the Euro patches, these little darker green things. So we have a very good thick coverage across there. And where we're doing it. This is 1 million times. Lots of animals. They're going to be moved every 4 hours. Thank God. Have you ever been to some of Jim's grazing schools years ago? I've known Jim for years and went to some of his great. We talk about the problem for most of us is we don't have enough animals to make grazing a full-time job. What if your job was 8 hours moving animals, opening gates, closing gates? Watching as they walk through, move to the next field. Here's another one. This is 375,000 pounds. I don't know if you can see. We just waited 10 minutes and took this picture down here. Same cows are up there. These are stocker calves. This is your competition. This is in Argentina. They're grazing summer animals, sedan grass. You can see in the top corner, left-hand corner there, they're irrigating this. And they're putting weight. One guy's job is to move cows all day long. Every 20 minutes, these stalkers are moving to move cows. Every 20 minutes. 3 times an hour. That's his job.
So this would be, if there's a fence up here, he's putting another fence up 20 feet back.
Yes.
Just do another section. So he's constantly moving the fence all day.
Or he set the fence up, take the fence down. That's he's making money doing it. You figure 375,000 pounds. These are 700 pounders. They're putting on 3 pounds a day. There's 500 of them in there.
So what do they do at night when they start going?
Then they bring them in, or that early 7 now. So in the middle of the afternoon, they kind of sit down. You know where your cattle, they don't graze all day long. They only graze about 8 hours out of the day. What's the standard work shift? 8 hours a day. This guy has enough cows, he can hire a guy to move cows for 8 hours a day. Here's that stream. You pulled out of here, you grazed it down. 6 weeks later, it looked like this. Look at the difference in the stream banks. The only part we have left,
It's a hot bank right there.
is this one steep bank right here. This is just one time. Think what we did there. We did that 3 or 4 more times. Those banks would be completely healed over. Would there be any stream bank erosion on that bank? No. We can do this without putting in a permanent fence and fencing the animals out.
So how you gonna prove that? How you gonna convince the county that?
EPA. You know why we fence the animals out of the stream? It's a bureaucratic answer to an environmental solution to a problem.
Right.
I can take state conservation, or the administrator of your environmental state agency and drive down a road and never have to get out. Look, oh, put a fence there, that's good. They can see a physical barrier. But if you come back 10 years later and put a fence in there, we probably have more stream erosion in there than we did if we can manage it. I know we'll have more if we manage it. You cannot manage grasslands without animals. Part of God's big plan. Grass plant is designed to be grazed. Grazing animals are designed to eat grass. If you separate the two, you're messing with God's plan. Nothing good happens when you mess with his system. All right? Grazing in soil, what's the big deal about? It's all about soil microorganisms. What have you talked about? Yes. That's where they live. The water cycle that Jim talked about, in terms of those inches of rain that we should get. The mineral cycle that's going on in those soils. And diversity. What does make up your pasture fields? You've got to have a lot of different plants out there. Different kinds of plants. There's a lot of different bacteria, biology going on, microbiology. There's a lot of animals in your soil. Bacteria by far the largest. Fungi, good analogy. Earthworms is the ones we can see. You can see earthworms, then you kind of know you have some of these other ones, but they may not be at the total population you'd like. One of the goals I working with grazing folks is every time I put a spade in the pasture field, there should be an earthworm, at least one earthworm, every spade full of soil.
I read something one time that's supposed to be, you want pH of 7, you need 25 worms per square foot.
Yeah, they really build your soil. They bring phosphorus, they help buffer the soil, improve the soil pH. They release a lot of the calcium that's tied up into the soil. All that's tied to soil microbiology. It's not just the worms, it's the bugs, the gut, that live in the gut of the worm. We can see earthworms. These other ones you don't see. This is a magnification of a root. That's a root hair. And that glow around it's not a halo. Okay? That's just the activity from the soil microbes. There's 2,000 times more microbes around the edge of a root than there is in the soil itself. You get away from that. What's the feed to those bacteria? The root. The root is feeding those things. Okay? And all this is showing you that. This is a cross section, if you will. That spongy looking part is the root, the center of the root, the concentration in the middle. The center there is the center of the root. This is a silt particle which says soil. There's another one right above it where that 100 is. It's just a particle of silt. One silt grain. It's 100,000 magnification. And then, that shiny stuff or smooth is exudates. Simply, it's sugar. The root is oozing out sugar to feed those microbes. It's a relationship that they have. They feed it, and in return, those microbes are feeding the nutrients back into the soil. Roots aren't out there like giant pumps sucking nutrients and water out of the soil. It's a complicated relationship between the soil microbes, the soil biology, and the roots. It's transferring the nutrients and the water through the root skin, that layer of the root, moving it into that porous area of the root so they can move back up. Where's that sugar come from? Photosynthesis. It all comes from the top. The leaves capture the sunlight, make the sugar, send it down to the roots. The roots grow with that. They also send some of that out into the soil to feed the microbes. So just what that looks like, and a little closer up of those little thin strands are the fungi. And it's those mycorrhizae fungi that colonize on the plant root. Every plant species have a different species of fungi that work with that plant. So if you ever inoculate your legumes, you can't use the same inoculum for soybeans that you use on alfalfa and clover. Now usually alfalfa and clover, you put them in the same bag, so they don't have to have as much inventory. But soybean, and you'd be surprised, in my world, corn and soybeans, part of Ohio, I go out there, and you go buy seed at some of my local co-ops, and buy a bag out, they'll throw you a bag of soybeans. The because they don't know. You need to be smarter than the guy across the counter. You need to flip that bag over and see if it's for the clover or the legumes you're buying for your forage. And be aware. Just another, that's not an infected or a bad root. Notice how the fungi work on those individual root hairs. And they are extension of the root system that go out there. Actually, a lot of these fungi are what move the phosphorus into the plant. They move the phosphorus from non-legume plants to legume plants, and then take the nitrogen from the legume plant and move it over to the grass plant. So they act as a conduit between the plant species out there. And if we don't have a mixture, diversity of plants out there, they don't have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, what happens? You die. So we got to make sure we can build up the purposes in our soil so we have a healthy soil, a healthy bunch of microbes in our soil. How do we do it? By building soil organic. A lot of it from adding those animals. Just a picture of the field. A lot of us would say that's not a very good pasture field. There's a lot of undesirable plants out there. Wild carrot, Phoenix, lace-up, there's a lot of young goldenrod down underneath there. There's just a lot of, we would call them weeds. You gotta remember what a weed is. Plant out of place. But a weed, what causes weeds to come there? Weeds are never a problem. Weeds are not the problem. Someplace in the back, someone has made a bad decision to cause those weeds to grow. They are a symptom of the problem. More than likely, this was overgrazed. Doesn't have a healthy, it's not a healthy soil. If I see a lot of Queen Anne's lace, I know the soil is low in calcium, available calcium, soluble calcium. Because they will tolerate low calcium. But what do they have? What kind of root system?
They would probably deep roots in the field up.
The full calcium on. Again, in God's big plan of things, if you mess up, there's a plant there to solve the problem. A deep-rooted plant, dandelions are another one. You have a lot of dandelions in your yard, more likely it's low in calcium. Because they have a deep root system, they'll pull calcium from deeper in the soil, bring it up on the surface, make more calcium available for other plants, and we can change it around. Now if you look at clover, there's a lot of clover colonies. We didn't see them before, we just managed the grazing. Use those cows to do it. The rest of you are probably going out there with the bush hog and mow it all night long. I'm trying to get you to think about using your cows to do a lot of the work for you. So who works for who on your farm? Are the cows your employees? Or are they the ones at the gate yelling at you and telling you you're late for my dinner? Who works for who? And who makes the big money? Business. Think of General Motors, the lady, chairman of General Motors. You think she makes more than the guy at the end of the line that puts the last hubcap on? Yeah. All he worries about is do I have enough hubcaps for the next car. She's worried about how many impalas they have to make in 2016. What colors do we need? Get a new paint. She's worried about marketing. So what are your decisions? You worried about how much feed you have left to feed the cows till the grass greens up? Or are you worried about how you're going to get feed out to them when you get home? So think about it. Are you the CEO or the employee? Well, we can build organic matter. We can, as we manage our grazing. As the plant is grazed, it gives off more exodus because it's known that we have to regrow. So it feeds the soil microbes, gets a flux of new nutrients, and it'll regrow back. Now, that's assuming we get enough regrow that we have extra nutrients to share with the rest of it. If we overgraze it, what happens? It's not enough to share. There's not enough leaf area there to share any extra nutrients with the plants. So we have to manage the bottom parts. The most important part of your pasture is underground. What do the root systems look like? Because the longer the rest period between grazing events, the more roots we maintain or grow. And those feed the microorganisms, which withstands the droughts. Most of our droughts are man-made. Not from the lack of rain, because we're not getting all the water we could out of the soil that we have. And we're not letting the water penetrate. Jim said earlier about that water cycle. Because how much, still a little bit today, this afternoon, most of us are in that 35 to 40 inch range. Did you see the yield you should be expecting? What was it? 7 to 9 tons. How many in here are growing 7 to 9 tons forage per acre? That one, the field, but per acre. Could be because of our roots. The diversity, like I said, there's a lot of diversity in our plants. Different plants root deeper. I don't mind having dandelions in my pasture. They're deep rooted, you pull minerals up. Actually, I'm a shepherd. By pasture land, the end of April. As soon as the dandelions green up, that's some of the first plants those ewes eat. Because they're big with land. And they go around looking for the minerals. Dandelions, they know it's high in minerals. They have a high demand for minerals. How do you supply minerals to your animals? In a bag? What's in that bag? Ground up rocks. Not real digestible. That dandelion is in an organic form. When she eats that dandelion leaf, the zinc and the copper and the calcium and the phosphorus are readily available to that animal. She goes over and licks the mineral, gets a lick of mineral, this mineral over there. Yeah, she's getting in all those things, but they're just ground up rocks. So what do? They go through it, some of them will dissolve off, but what happens to most of them? Which isn't bad. I get those minerals back out on my soils. They're fertilizing it, so it's not all bad. But one of the things we should be thinking about right now is adding some diversity. This is the ideal time to be thinking about doing some cross seeding, adding clover to our fields right now, spinning it on. Because we want to get cover out there. If we look, we want to look at the mulch on the surface and the green leaves as well. Because the more we have out there, keeping that soil cool will speed up the whole microbiology process. Temperature. And the way that works is because it stays cool. Those green leaves are much cooler than even a mulched, those ground mulch. Because what? Just think about the color difference. You got to remember what this green plant's doing. It's alive. Is the brown stuff alive? So it's not going to regulate any temperature. It's just going to absorb sunlight and get hotter and hotter. Sunlight penetrates or gets more and more. But the green leaf over there, what's going through its veins? Water. What's the temperature of that water coming out of the soil? If it's deep, it should be around 55. Farther north, that's 52. So that it's bringing that cool water out. So it's actually cooler as long as those plants are actively growing. They're going to stay cool. If you notice the temperature underneath those leaves, it's 77 degrees. Over here on the mulch, it's 91 degrees. Soil temperature. This is just poked into the soil just 2.5 inches. Okay, well, when we look at that, why is that important? When we're in the 70s, 80s, we're going to use all the moisture in the water, in the soil for plant growth. We get up to 100 degrees, we start losing lots of our moisture. 85% of it's going to be evaporated. What's the soil temperature on your pasture field in July? And then when we get over 130 degrees, plants aren't functioning anymore. If you get to 140 degrees, you start killing soil microbes. What's the temperature of a clean tilled cornfield? And those black soils of western Ohio. They can get 160 degrees. We're killing soil microbes in our cornfields. So they get shaded. But once they're dead, do they come back?
They can, it's slow.
It's a very slow process to rebuild those populations back. So we need to think about this. So keeping the ones we have alive and allowing them to multiply. Because they're not going to multiply real fast after they get destroyed. So think about in your pasture how we can maintain that. It helps improve infiltration of our water. So as we get that shade, it keeps it cool, but some of you probably have seen this demonstration. This is just 3 different heights of grass, a very short, less 2 inches, with a canopy that's around 3 to 4 inches. And I'll tall canopy that's over 6 inches there. Simulated a rain event on that, and you can see how much of the water that ran off. And this isn't a very steep slope, this is a 6% slope. So it's not a real steep slope that's causing it. It has everything to do with the amount of residual we leave out there. What did Jim say yesterday? Grass feeds grass. Grass feeds the soil. And lastly, grass feeds your animals. Here we're feeding the soil. We're feeding that water into the soil so it will be there for future uses to grow more grass. Grass grows grass. We take too much off. We don't get too much back. So building soil with grazing is improving the water holding capacity. As we increase our organic matter content, we can hold more and more water in the soil. One example we have, 2%, the organic matter in your soil, will hold 32,000 gallons of water. What's a 1 inch rain on an acre? How many gallons? It's 27,000. In our sales firms back here. Design there. Whoops. So this is a little more than an inch rain. That's 21% of 5.5 inch. 5% organic matter will hold 80,000 gallons of water. So we can hold that 3 inch rain. We have 5% organic. Assuming we have a cover there to intercept the raindrops so they're not beaten down too hard. That's the purpose of the green plant out there. It breaks the impact of the raindrop. Especially with thunderstorms. The raindrops come down very, very hard. So you want something out there so that rain isn't beating on the snow, so the leaves are out there and intercepting, taking the impact from that. So they'll hold 53% of the 5 inch rain, and then we get up to 8%. That was the natural organic matter of your soils. Before we had any influence with our European culture, we had 8% organic matter in most of our soils. Then, we could hold most of that. We had very little flooding in natural history. The soils absorbed most of the thunderstorms and the rains.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is common knowledge that,
Yes.
a million years ago we could hold. Then why are we having such issues with it
Now?
nowadays?
Because we don't have that.
Why wouldn't we be growing to that, or building to that, or focusing the people to go to that direction instead of going the other direction?
Well, it's a good question. Why has this happened? Because man in its infinite wisdom can always think it can out-control nature, doesn't it?
That's why it builds dikes.
Yeah, that's why we build dams.
And bigger bulldozers.
We think we can beat nature. One of Jim's great saying is, nature always bats last. Okay? But as man, we're always trying to fight and be in control of our surroundings. We always try to be in control. We never give it up. So it's part of that inherent nature of man to be in control. So, your belief system. That's the big battle between mankind is always trying to happen. The same thing happened in the Garden of Eden. Man wanted to be in control. So we changed the whole outcome. We can use animals to control. They won't eat ironweed. If you put enough pressure on those cows, they'll eat ironweed. Now, as shepherds, we know sheep and goats just eat ironweed anyways.
I've even found I get rid of Japanese stilt grass with them. You put the sheep pressure on it, they will clean it up. And I've gone and done people's yards with friends of mine. We take the sheep out with the net up, and it takes the stilt grass out.
Cows will eat it too.
Yeah, little pressure, they'll eat a lot.
17% protein.
This is 120,000-pound stock. And we can get them to eat that. You notice we left pretty good residue out there. They didn't eat all the grass. It's about competition. When you squeeze the animals tighter together, there's more competition. I grew up with several brothers. There's a lot of competition at dinner time. We soon learned as we got older that Dad always got first. The potatoes never made it around twice. Mom never worried about leftovers. The three of us were all home eating. It was competition. Think about it, same way here. These girls are going to eat it. Even if they don't like it, they're going to eat it because it's something that's like brothers, just more out of spite. You don't want him to have it. Same way here. She's going to eat it just because she doesn't want her friend to have it. You ever harvested hay with your cows? This is third cutting hay. Instead of harvesting it with tractor baler, we're out there harvesting it with the animals that are going to eat it anyway. So we're resting our pastures at this time, and what's that going to give us?
More grazing.
More stockpile for winter grazing. So we're harvesting this hay now with very little cost. No diesel, no tractor, no expense in terms of hay, the hay part, but we're harvesting these guys. And it depends on your system. How often you want to move them, that's how much you give them. How efficient you want to be. Because the hay system is only 70% efficient. If I just move them once a day, I'm at 70% efficiency, harvest. But when you're making hay, what, that 30% that's lost, what is that? It's the leaves. It's that chaff that falls out of the baler. All the crushed leaves. What's left is the stems. What do you think they're going to leave? What 30% does the cow leave when she's grazing?
Stems.
The stems. Yeah, we're efficient. Not the same efficiency, but we're more efficient in terms of quality of the feed.
You still have about 25 minutes.
Oh. I'm trying to talk to you.
Well, we know we're a little late, so we're going a little late. Okay?
As long as they're not late for lunch.
Yeah. We'll get there in time.
So how can we get over some of these things? Combine your animals. If you got heifers, there's ways you can manage it. If you can't manage, you don't have enough of your own animals, maybe with that hay field, get with your neighbor. Put more animals together. Or go out and buy some extra animals. But try to make bigger groups. Now, for some of it can be the bulls out there, you gotta watch. You may not want to breed all the animals at the same time. But that's kind of some of that management, how you can make it work. But think about ways you can make it work, not think about ways you can't make it work. I'm a half full guy. So I always look for ways we can make something happen, not the ways it can't happen. Be positive. Think about ways you can make it work for you. Do it seasonally. Just do it part of the year. Like this guy, he just harvests his last cut of hay at a very high stocking density. Instead of opening the gate and let him have the whole field, he rations it out. You never feed your hay that way, do you? You give them the whole stack of winter supply at one time. You feed it a bale at a time. A couple bales. You don't give them a whole winter's worth at one time because they're not very efficient. Remember? She doesn't think about long range. She just thinks about the next fall. She's not worried about next week, or even tomorrow. You have to think about what's going on. Please, just do it in case. Some of the equipment, those minerals, put them on there. Move your mineral around. Those step-in posts and reels. Those are the tools you have. Doesn't cost you very much. The step-in posts, poly reels, as long as you have electricity available to you. So my farm has electric fence all the way around. So wherever I go, I can plug in. And tie on to it, strip off any area that I want. So it makes it fun. Monitoring, things you need to look for when you're building soil organic matters. Look at the forages. What's the color of your forage? What color should it be? Should be a dark one. The density. You have a thick, dense forage. One of the things Jim showed you, I didn't talk about it. What should you talk about the amount of forage you have, but you ought to have 350 pounds minimum of dry matter per inch of height. How do you measure? Measure how tall it is, clip it off, and dry it and plant. Remember, this is dry matter. my farms are between 350 to 400 pounds of dry matter per acre. That means when the pasture's 10 inches tall, there's 2 tons of feed out there. Do you know how much is on your farm? Diversity. You ought to have multiple species of grass and legumes out there and forms. So you ought to have several different species of grasses. At least 2 different legumes. Some forbs. You can introduce forbs and they come natural for you. What are some of the domesticated forbs you can buy?
Like radishes.
Well, radishes would be,
Chicory.
they'd be an annual. I was thinking of chicory, forage plantain. Those are domesticated, if you will. They've been selected, bred for. They're just like the chicory that grows wild, only they have bigger, broader leaves, more forage. Everything's the word up, there's forage radishes. They're different than tillage radishes. They have bigger leaves. If we have a compaction problem, that's one way to build soil microbes back into your soil is introducing brassicas into your field. The secret is turnips are always cheaper than radishes. Turnips are cheaper than radishes.
And they'll eat turnips faster than
And
radishes.
turnips taste better. You'll get better utilization of the turnip. But we'll get that because they are full of nutrients for the microbes. And you'll see a spike in the microbiology in that pasture field after you've introduced a couple pounds of turnips to it. You don't even graze them. The benefit from them is good.
So just seed your turnips. Just seed your pasture with turnips.
Interseeded, no-till them in. Yes. You can do it right now or spring.
Can you frost seed it?
If you have good enough bare ground. Frost seeding is dependent upon bare ground.
And they need soil contact to grow.
Yes.
If you get it too high, they don't grow. If you go too deep, they won't either.
Basic agronomy, Jim Hendershot, I'm a soil scientist by training in agronomics. He has an animal science. Think about a seed needs to have contact with soil. Seed soil contact. The seed isn't going to grow unless it's touching soil. It may germinate, but it won't grow and survive. That root has to go down into the soil. So some of the things will germinate up on it as long as it has moisture, but it doesn't mean it's going to survive. So we want to try and get. So one of the things if you have some bare open soil, your pasture field, got some joids out there, cross seeding will work. Other thing, if you have a lot of duff, you may want to drag it with a harrow or even tie tires together and pull it across the field and try to open that soil up, pull the duff up, get the leaves pulled. You had a lot of heavy snow, sometimes our grasses are matted down. So we want to kind of fluff that up and see how much bare soil is in. So there's things we can do out there to open that area up to get a better frost seed. If not, then the best angle is to drill them. See, my pastures now are so dense, the frost seeds don't work. I have to drill up things. So hopefully it doesn't rain a whole lot. Next week I was planning on drilling clover and some new other grasses into my pasture field, along with some chicory, probably some turnips as well. That's some of that diversity. Annuals are different than perennials. So I get a whole round of bee diversity out there. And diversity drives that soil microbiology. I'm like Jim, I've learned a whole lot more about soil microbiology in the last 10 years than when I was in school. Soil microbiology has not been taught at Ohio State since 1974. I was scheduled to take this class and left. North Carolina State. So I didn't get soil microbiology.
Why they quit teaching?
Not, at that time, what was the big push in agriculture?
CDK?
Yes, it's chemistry. Soil chemistry. So it wasn't a big push on soil microbiology. Even soil physics. The engineers took soil physics classes in terms of bearing strength, loading rates, and some of those types of things. In terms of all the push was on soil chemistry. Now we've kind of circled back around and said soil chemistry doesn't mean microbiology. It's still the soil microbes that break down that chemical fertilizer into the soil and release it to the top. full top. What growth response? Is your grass growing back after you graze it? What's your growth response? Livestock indicators. What are the conditions, body condition of your cows? It should fluctuate. Are you watching, monitoring the performance of those calves? The manure consistency. Do you look at the cow pies? Cow pies tell you a lot of what the cows are eating, and how it works. Measured things you can record, rest periods. How long a rest did you give that area? Grazing period, how long were they out there? What was the residual height? How much did you leave? Those things, by gathering and keeping that data, gives you an idea of what works and what doesn't work on your farm, on your species. Everything's a little different. Your farm's unique to you, your magnet, to your cows, your animals, your soils. Do you know your soils by name? Well, another thing I do teach my animal science friends. A lot of you probably have names, have your animals' names. Some of them. I don't mean derogatory names. For the one that goes the wrong way, or stands crossways in front of the chute, she probably has a special name. Or you may have a special name for her. Well, but do you know your soil names? A lot of the guys I work with don't know their given soil name, that soil survey name. And there's no such thing. My brother's one of those guys. That's black gumbo. That is not a name of a soil.
Not even in Louisiana?
Not even Louisiana. It's not a name. But we can record some of those things. Know what's growing out in your field. Do you have wedding cakes or pumpkin pies? You don't want wedding. You only want wedding cake once in your life. If you're blessed, one day you'll have a wedding cake. Unless you're a father of several girls, you may enjoy wedding cake financially. But we want pumpkin pies. You want your cows to make pumpkin pies, not wedding cakes. The manure should be running, not soupy running. It shouldn't shoot out the back of it. But when it hits, it should pop. Pop, 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 pop. How many times a day?
He said 11 times.
13 times a day. Think about it. This, if it stands up, it stands like a wedding cake, too much fiber in their diet. They're not consuming all they can. Spending too much time in their gut. Foragers should spend less than 36 hours. I made it so it comes out looking like this. Real stimmy coarse hay or coarse pasture may spend 48 to 72 hours in their gut. That means they're going to eat half as much. Because they're full. It's plugged up the system every 4 years, every 5 years. The quality of our life depends on the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. All those things depend on the quality of the soil. Things I used to do with the sixth graders, get them to think about how important the soil is. I'll ask you, have you ever ate any food that didn't come from the soil? Sometimes the sixth grader, fifth grader, thought for it. Well, the first one think, well, fish, Bob. Mr. Hendershot, fish don't come from the soil. So what do the fish eat? Well, they eat littler fish. What's the little fish eat? Well, they eat plants growing in the water. Where do the nutrients come in that water for those little plants floating in the water? Oh, back in the soil. So even that salmon we had last night comes from the soil. Everything we eat, the clothes we wear, that's not the clothes we wear. Don't mix it. The shoes we wear, the leather. We depend a lot on the soil, quality of our life. So think about how important the soil is to us, and how you can improve the lot of soil you have under your control. You may not own it, you may just rent it, you may just advise others to have control. But the soil's a part of our lives. Questions?
Only question is, Could there be more discussions on the soil?
More discussion on soils? Well, that's the whole purpose of this year, 2015, is to raise the awareness of soils and the importance of soils for all of us. Being a soil scientist, I trained as a soil scientist, that's one of the things we try to talk about is the importance of soil. But most people haven't looked at the soil as being important. So I'm real excited about agriculture now because there's a lot of emphasis on soil quality and soil health right now in agriculture. So that there is a growing effort in that. Master gardeners now talking about soil quality and soil health. So it's not just farmers. Others are thinking about the quality of the soil. In terms of Madison Avenue, downtown New York, I don't know if those people know where their food comes from, let alone what the quality of the soil is. Is there another question?
Other questions?
When you're selecting some diversity in plants and you want to increase your phosphorus and phosphorus availability, what are some good suggestions on it? Because we've got a field now at a place that is extremely phosphorus deficient and it's laden in cedar trees, which fell nicely to the chainsaw.
What's the soil type? Is it laden with limestone?
We're in a transitional situation between limestone and shale. And we do have a clay-based soil on top. I think it's bark silt loam, I believe, on top. But we also have a short depth to stacked boulder rocks. Not giant surface rocks, but if you dig down, it's nicely stacked throughout there.
So, usually you find cedar trees on high pH soils.
Raw, my pH is perfect. That's what threw me off.
Or very acid soils. But typically what you probably have is your pH is tied up, the calcium, high calcium level is tied up with phosphorus.
Okay.
So in that soil, it's created a calcium phosphate. So it's kind of tied up. What you really want to do is grow something that creates more acid in the soil. So it's something like a lesbodisa.
Okay.
Which the trefoil would work there, something that has a lot of tannins in it.
Bird's foot would probably establish. I don't think the the Cerisa won't, but.
Cerisa won't. I'm thinking of the Korean types.
Okay.
Marion, Legend.
And we also can't, with chicken litter, if we add the poultry litter,
Yes.
the problem is the copper.
Yes.
Because most of it is high copper that we can get.
Otherwise, get some walnuts, bedding pack. Or enforcement. If you have any statements supposed to do.
We're in Charlestown, we have plenty of that.
Let me break in here just a moment and make an announcement. You are not late for anything, okay? Because we were late getting started in this session, we are moving this session up. This session really ends at 10:45. The next session, the break will end at 11:15. The next session will start at 11:15. And most importantly, lunch has been pushed back to 12:15. So, okay, so we are not late. We are still on time. We still have a few minutes. I see people getting up and leaving, okay? Let me remind you also of the evaluation forms. I have forms up here if you haven't. And by that, I still have 5 or 6 minutes left in this session.
If you didn't get a copy of this, it's down there at the National Lab, or National Grazing Lands, at their booth. So I think it's the second row in. But we have some more of those. I got one extra one here. I want to use a prop.
Also want to say that Bob is speaking again this afternoon, so you'll have another chance to hear him and ask other questions. So he's on at 3 o'clock. Yes, question?
Yeah, our indicator in West Virginia, for these lines, and West Virginia's got broom sage, or whatever.
Yep.
What does that plant do anything for soil or in the soil other than let you know you better put some lime?
It is an indicator species for low pH and or low phosphorus. So when I see broom sedge, there's 2 different reasons. A lot of times it's causing blight, but I also can see it on a soil that has perfect pH, but the phosphorus level is down at 2. So it's really an a phosphorus level. So that's one of the reasons we ask to get the soil test, because there's usually two answers to every question.
Well, and that's what happened with ours. We're in Jefferson County, and there's broom sage there and cedar, and Mom was like, oh, well, that just indicated we need lime. The soil sample came back, and we actually sent a second one in because I didn't believe it. And it was correct, the phosphorus was extremely low. And those are the two plants that are growing
See,
at
here's
will
the-
there.
So it's a phosphorus, so you should probably fertilize by phosphorus of some sort. But
That plant
The
doesn't
plant-
really
it-
do anything other than
No,
just an indicator.
it's not a big, it's a true sedge, it's not a grass. So if you look at it, it has three sides, it's a triangle stem.
Because you said with the Queen Anne's Lace, it actually does some repair.
Well, it has a function in the soil, okay? And it does help. Broom sedge really doesn't, it brings some phosphorus up, but in terms of forage value, there's little forage value. You'll find that animals will graze it when it's young and tender. As soon as it gets, and it's more of an issue of, if you ever seen it when it's blooming, it has a down. And most animals don't like to eat down because it gets caught in their throat, it tickles all the way down. So they really don't like eating any plant that has down on it. So I have seen Kathy Ball, who was here 2 years ago, last time. I think Kathy was here. She can get animals to eat broom sedge, but it takes some training for them. One of the ways she'll tell you to spray a little molasses on it, and you just gotta train them, and that's a good thing to eat. And then you just kind of wean them off of the molasses and say, hey, I can eat this. But it's a high fiber plant. So that's the reason they eat it when it's young, but once it starts to elongate, it's a really, you wouldn't want to feed stalker calves with such hay or some meat. But dry beef cows, you do well. They won't gain weight on it. They will maintain themselves. Question in the back? Sorry.
I've got on the soil test as we get back, magnesium is kind of getting off the chart a little bit. Is there any way to correct this, or should I be looking at this as something really serious to look at?
Magnesium tells me you've probably been liming with high magnesium lime. What we would try to recommend there is adding a calcium source to try to get those back in balance. So I want to try gypsum is another source of high calcium. Gypsum won't change your pH, but it does increase the calcium level. That's another thing you can use is gypsum. It won't put the phosphorus in, but it will tie up some of the other calcium. And what it does, it'll help leach some of that magnesium down through the soil profile. So it's more of balancing everything. And so if one's real high, that means you have to bring everything up because it's real hard to take one back down. So we try to bring other things up in balance. Typically, as we add a high calcium source, be it gypsum or a high cal lime, then the magnesium tends to leach down through the soil as the calcium replaces it in the soil. The magnesium becomes free and it's water soluble, so it tends to move down into the soil profile. So you end up with magnesium springs, which is all right. Make the water harder. Won't hurt anything. Your cows won't get any grass cutting either.
Just also handles compaction too, right?
Yes. Your soils tend to be tight when you have a high magnesium level too. So they tend to crust, water doesn't move as freely through it. It's one of the reasons we like using this. I'm a big proponent of a balanced soil fertility program. Looking at calcium, magnesium, and potassium. And I look at your base saturation numbers. I like to see my base saturation of calcium in a grazing operation above 7. And my magnesium between 20 and 25, and potassium under 5%. As you go across there. So you always ought to have 4 times more calcium than magnesium, twice as much magnesium as calcium, or as potassium.
Okay, I have 10:45, so it is now, I think, time.